Okay, so it gives me enormous pleasure to introduce our next speaker, a great friend, an absolute creative inspiration, director of Agents of Change, which was the design studio that we worked with hand in hand to create Young V&A. And I would say if anyone here is engaging on a transformative project that wants to put young people, communities at the heart of that and learn how to do things differently in ways that matter, then Gill is the person to have the conversation with. So everyone, please, massive round of applause for an incredibly inspirational designer and architect, Gill Lambert. Woo!
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. No pressure at all there, Helen. Thank you very much. There we go. Hola, everyone. This is a very joyful stage, isn't it? So I'm going to be talking to you about joy and how to design for joy and process. So I feel like I'm in the perfect environment to do that. So to start off by introducing my practice. So we're architects, but we also work across a number of sectors, different types of buildings. So we're interior designers, we're exhibition designers, we're architects. We wear lots of different hats. And that depends on the user's needs, the client's needs. So we find ourselves in these unique situations. So 1 minute we're designing a community centre, a new build building, and the next minute we're designing a museum for young people. What I'm going to do today is focus on the process of design and what that can do. So our approach is human-centred, and this means that we're interested in the end users, how the project, the building, the design will live on through time, and to try and collaboratively daydream what that might look like with people. So we engage audiences, and then by doing that, we deliver value and hopefully more joyful and engaging spaces. So here we are at the Young V&A in the early process, engaging a group of primary school children. More on that later. As architects and designers, we use drawings to communicate our ideas. So how do we open up the design process to as many users as possible? So we call this drawing a spatial constitution. It's trying to take the essence of the project, the priorities of the project that we've agreed with the stakeholders. They're listed on the side. You probably can't read them, but that doesn't matter. The point is, we're finding a way of representing those different elements of the project without designing them. We're starting to put them together in a way that is spatial, and we're starting to make more and more discussions about how that might evolve into a design. So this was for a demountable performance space. So we know we needed a roof, we used a big hat, but then lots of different functions needed to happen at different times. So how do we kind of start to piece those together? And then the other thing is I would advocate for is a hands-on approach. That can happen in a different way to test the different challenges that are arising as you're designing on different projects. In this case, we're in a playground. We're actually testing that same project using chairs and cones to mark out the spatial design. So then we can act out. We can almost start to try and perform and imagine that space as it's going to be built. And then it gives room for bringing everyone on that journey, because not everyone can read architects' drawings and plans. So different ways of acting out your projects, very much advocate that. And then sometimes, actually, what we need to do is step back and think about, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to add value to people's lives. Perhaps sometimes we need to do less than we thought we might need to do. So in this case, in a primary school playground, we found a shed. We moved it across the playground, we bought a bucket of paint, blackboard paint, and activated that surface. So very little cost, low carbon, but yet the children had a lot of fun. So this is kind of creating joy with very little. So thinking about, not always about the grand design option, sometimes just thinking about minor things that you can do to add value in your approach. So that was the kind of toolkit, I suppose, giving you a little bit of introduction to how we work. And now I'm going to talk through the Young V&A. Thank you, Helen, the great introduction. So I think, you're all aware now, there was such a strong vision behind the project. For us, it was absolutely fantastic opportunity. 5 years of my life, my kids were 1 and 3 when we started the project. They're 8 and 10 now, and the project's been open for a year. But yeah, taking this existing museum, so it's a retrofit project using architectural language, but how to transform this into the most joyful museum in the world. Again, no pressure. Actually starting with the community. Our studio is really just a short walk from the museum, which is in the centre in red. And this is a 15-minute walk around the building itself. So what we did was start to think about the kind of social ecology of the neighbourhood and what different organisations were operating in the area, a really kind of in-depth analysis so that we could work out who needed to be in the room, who we could collaborate on the project. So the other ingredient, taking the scale in a little bit, is the building itself, so the architecture. The museum's building originally was assembled in South Kensington, so in West London, and then in 1875, the whole building was taken apart, dismounted, put on a horse and cart, and then taken across to East London, that's where I'm going now, where it was reassembled. So it's got a really interesting story itself. So this is one of our assets. The other thing in terms of assets is thinking about the materiality, the material of the building, what's there, what narrative stories can we tell by responding to that, but also in a retrofit project, what needs to be stripped out for this new use, and what materials might you consider keeping for reuse. So that audit being a really important process at the beginning. And then this idea of co-designing, and for us, big vision, big idea for the most joyful museum in the world, great brief, but let's take our stakeholders on this journey, so starting from scratch. And what was really enjoyable, and we were lucky to have, was the existing museum as a blank, sort of starting point for that conversation. So something that we could actually respond to. We could go out into the museum. This is a group of primary school children. We also work with secondary school, with their families, and with teachers and educators. So we went out, we took these pink speech bubble post-it notes, and we were sticking them around the building, and they were coming up with their ideas of joy. So how could we start, what does joy mean to them, first of all, but then how can we start to build that into our designs from the scratch? So not saying, here's our design, what do you think about it? Really just building a brief and going on a journey from the start together. So then that process was iterative, and it started to accumulate, and then on the left here, so talking about co-working. Helen covered that a little bit. That was very much about us shaping an iterative process. So that's mapping it out, thinking, what might happen in this workshop? What agency do the people in this workshop have to have an impact on the design? And really holding that and making sure that we, rigorously delivered. So yeah, co-design, co-production, and